Well, it's great to be here. It's my first time at Harvey Mudd, and I've had a full day. Got to see some presentations by your entrepreneurs, attend leadership class, and get the tour of I think most of the campus. That was extensive. What I wanted to talk about tonight was leading high growth businesses from a Silicon Valley perspective. So, first of all, why would that be interesting to you? Leadership, this is a leadership series. There's a lot of different types of leadership, and I've been fortunate over my now 40 years in the business to lead in various roles. So there's technical leadership, there's managerial leadership, and then there's what I've been doing for the last decade now, which I would call advisory leadership. So when you're on a board of directors, you're a consultant, you're actually advising the leaders, you're not actually doing the leading yourself. And they all have different components to them. And then why high growth? Well, it turns out high growth companies create lots of opportunity. They're a lot of fun to be in. They have their share of challenges, and there's a lot of issues. But if you can be in a high growth environment, if you haven't already, or if you're just starting out, I guarantee you at some point in your career, it's a lot of fun if you can find a company that's growing. Challenges you, you can learn faster, you make mistakes faster, but you learn faster from those mistakes and you grow faster. So what I was going to do is just go through sort of from where I started and go through and pick out just lessons that I've learned along the way and share some of those with you tonight. And they'll come in the form of some startup lessons and some large company lessons and different viewpoints. But I'd like to start back as I graduated from college. I went to work for a company that was one of the largest companies going then, RCA Corporation, 100,000 employees. And you know, for the fun of it, I do career counseling now. It's just a hobby. And I talk to people maybe almost once a week for the last 10 years, lots and lots of people. And when I talk to people that are graduating from school, like a lot of you are here, I actually recommend strongly that they go to work for a large, slow-growing company. And that's what I did at RCA, and I think there's a lot of good opportunities. The reason I recommend that is in a large, slow-growing company, you have processes in place, you have people to learn from, you have a lot of infrastructure, there's a lot of learning, and you kind of get your next degree, the first degree after college, from those first few years, and you build up a base to learn how to grow in other places. Well, I did that for a while, and then I went off. One of the great things is sometimes they'll pay for your college. They paid for me to go to Berkeley and get my Ph.D. They only gave me 2 years, so I had to get a Ph.D. in 2 years, which I managed to do. But I ran into this group that was starting a new database project. And so this was one of my first lessons in leading, and I was actually leading as a technical leader. So we had this new thing called relational databases. I don't know how many of you follow databases, but it had just been sort of defined. A guy at IBM, a fellow, had written the seminal paper on this. And everybody, all the universities were trying to implement it, see if it was a good idea. A number of companies were trying to do things. But most of it was toy projects. And it just so happened that I had done some real work in my first couple of years in the database field, knew something about building real systems. We had some good funding. We got extremely lucky because we got the first copy of this new software that came out of AT&T. In fact, the developers, Ken Thompson and Dennis Ritchie, flew out and brought this thing called Unix. And we were the first users of Unix, and we built our software on top of Unix. We built a system that was more reliable, more scalable, more real than most everything else, and it became quite popular. INGRES was quite a popular system. But at the same time, there was one other project that was going on that was a very real project, and that was at IBM. IBM in San Jose had this group of people, it must have been 15 PhDs, and I don't know how many other people, and they were by far the richest and most powerful company in the industry at the time. IBM was more dominant than any company today. And you say, how could a little group of students, there were 3 PhD students, 2 master students, and a couple of undergrads, how could they compete with this massively financed group at IBM, the leading company in the industry? And so that was one of my first lessons on leadership, and that is size counts in some ways, but agility and focus and energy can counterbalance size. And if you haven't read the book by Clayton Christensen, The Innovator's Dilemma, I highly recommend you read that book. It describes why a company who is in such a dominant position, IBM owned the database business, an old kind of database system, not relational. And their problem was they didn't really want to innovate. They didn't want these people to move quickly. They wanted to go slowly because they didn't want to disrupt their existing business. So here's an opportunity to grow companies, to grow new ideas. Just because there's a big, huge, installed, dominant player doesn't mean you can't innovate and you can't out-innovate them. And sometimes they're stuck with their success. And that was a really important lesson. So I left Berkeley after a couple of years, and a friend of mine was one of the founders of a company called Tandem Computers. This was one of the darlings of the 70s and 80s of Silicon Valley. It was a company that built fault-tolerant computers, non-stop computers. It was just when computers were going from batch processing at night to online processing, automated teller machines, point-of-sale systems, where people started to depend on computers for the first time. And if the computer didn't work, you couldn't take money out of the bank or buy something. And so that necessitated more fault-tolerant computers. And this was the invention of Tandem. And it was just a little tiny company, no revenue. And my friend called me up. He says, I think we need that database stuff. Would you talk to the VP of software? And so the VP of software says, so how long would it take to get a database on our product here? And I thought, and I said, well, I had a team of about 6 or 7 at Berkeley, and it was really a college thing. But give me 10 people for a year and a half, and I think we could have the beginnings of this. And so he said to me, what can you do by yourself in a year? And that's what startups are about. Startups are about tiny amounts of resources applied in a very focused way. And in fact, they doubled the resources. They gave me one other person, so 2 of us had a year to get that first product out, and we did. You worked pretty much around the clock, and you had certain advantages. I was telling this to the class before. You know the reason that God was able to create the heavens and the earth and everything else in 6 days, and on the 7th day he rested? How was that possible? A lot of work. No installed base. Now, if you've built a company and you're very successful, you have a lot of things to do because you've got to work with all the products and customers and problems. But if you're starting from a clean piece of paper, you just spend 100% of your time on that. So doing a startup, you have one opportunity to be spending 100% of your time on it. If you're a small team, so the database group was myself and this other guy. We sat in the same office. There was no email, but you didn't have to send email, call meetings or whatever. You just yelled across the room. And that's true I work with lots of startups today, and that's the environment is small, tightly focused, nothing else to do, no overhead, and you can make amazing progress in a short period of time. So you can do a lot with a little. But then you start to grow and you're successful and you start hiring more and more people, and you have to communicate where you're going, because as we talked about in the class today, if you think about each person as a vector, let's remember your vector math, the force, how hard the person is working, is the length of the vector, and the direction of the vector is where they're pointed. Well, if you have people working, one pointing in that direction, and one pointing in that direction, and maybe one pointing in that direction, and you're trying to go there, it's only the component of force in the direction that you want to go, if you remember all your vector arithmetic. So how do you get all those arrows to line up? Because you really want everybody putting all of their weight behind the direction that you're trying to go in. When you're small, you can communicate easily around the table. So when I started at Tandem, the company was smaller than this group of people in the room. And we started this thing. We started a lot of things because it's a very much culture-focused company that was trying to build a great place to work. Right across the street was a liquor store. And the guy in manufacturing on Friday afternoon at 4:30 would take one of the hand trucks and he'd go across the liquor store and stack it up with cases of beer. And we'd go into a conference room smaller than this, the whole company, and we'd have a communication session. Have a beer, but really talk about what's going on. And the engineers, here you are, I'm writing code for the database, somebody else is doing the operating system, this guy's doing the processor. You're kind of disconnected normally in a development environment. Here, we're listening to the guy who's trying to sell this stuff, or who's just talked to a customer, or the president who's trying to raise funding. And you communicate the entire essence of the company in that little room. And so all the arrows line up. Everybody knows exactly where we're going, and we're all working toward that goal. But of course, you get more successful, and the company grows even bigger. And so we were terrifically successful in the first 5 years. We had a plan to go from 0 to $100 million in revenue, and from 0 to 1,000 people in the first 5 years. And in today's dollars, it's a lot more, but that was a tremendous accomplishment. And as we got to be about 1,000 people, we said, well, how are we going to keep all those arrows lined up? How are we going to keep the culture that we've created? And so this guy, Jim Treibig, who is the CEO and quite a philosopher, said, we're going to sit down and figure out all the essence of our business. And all the executives got together and we wrote this little book. This is an original copy. And we have chapters on all the things about hiring and about products and about all the things that we believed in. And of course, he said, if it's really a good plan, this is the plan to go from 100 million to 1 billion in revenue, from 1,000 employees to 10,000 employees. He says, but if it's really a good plan, we should be able to get it on one piece of paper so we can explain it to the next 9,000 people that are joining us. Well, he didn't say how big the piece of paper could be, and he didn't say how small the writing could be, but in essence, this was the 5-year plan for the company to go from 100 million to 1 billion. And it has, as you look at it carefully, you can't see it, but a whole flow of hiring outstanding people, giving them a clear strategic direction, building great products that you can sell to customers to generate revenue, which eventually creates profits, which allow you to provide great incentives to hire more good people, and there are all these positive feedback loops. And there's a story you could spend the better part of 2 or 3 days, if you wanted to, explaining the essence of the company and what we believed in. And it was a way to communicate to all those other people where we were going and what the plan was and what was important to us and why our company was different and unique from other companies. And to me, if you're going to be a great leader and if you're going to try to build something with high growth, you must provide that framework. It's kind of like the difference between walking and running. When you're walking, you can look at your feet, you can see all the flowers and everything, you can take your time. That's low growth. When you're running, you have to have your head up, you have to just get an idea of where you're going, you have to have an essence of the direction, but you can't look at every little detail. If you're going to be hiring 9,000 people, you can't explain to everyone every detail, but if you give them a framework, they can make decisions on their own in their own little space, and they'll make good decisions if they know where you're going. How many times have you heard of a big company where somebody's working there and say, I just don't know what those guys up in the head office are thinking. Why are they doing that? I don't get it. There's so much of that goes around in big companies because they're too disconnected. And at Tandem, we were very focused on getting that framework, not every detail, but the framework of thinking across to everyone. And we continued to look at how we could provide this kind of leadership. We also had a set of principles. This company, and I'm not saying this is the right way to build a company, but this particular CEO believed in a very egalitarian, everybody's important, no special benefits. Everybody didn't make the same amount of money, but everybody had the same desk. Everybody had, if you were in office, the same kind of office. Very egalitarian. One of the things as a leader is not only talking about things, but leading through actions. And we had this trip, every company that sells things has a sales trip. If you sell enough, you get to go on the sales trip. It's a standard reward for all companies that have sales forces. So at Tandem, we had a thing called TOPS, Tandem Outstanding Performers. And what that was is for everybody who wasn't a salesperson. Every other person in the company was eligible for this trip, not salespeople, and by the percentage of people in the company. So if 10% of the people in the company were engineers, 10% of the people on the trip were engineers. But it was only the best engineers or the best support people or whatever. And it was a phenomenal trip. where everybody who went on that had a great time. And I remember being a host on one. I was in Hawaii, and we all arrived there, and there was a big bus for the people to go to the hotel. We got off the plane, and then there was this big stretch limo, and the person who was organizing it escorted the CEO to the stretch limo and said, "We'll meet you over at the hotel." And he looked at her and he said, "How could I ride in that limo? Listen, you did all the work organizing this. You ride in the limo, I'm riding on the bus with everybody else." And it's that kind of leadership where you really make a statement with your actions, I think, that drills home to people your values. And it's great to talk about it, but you got to live it. And Tandem was a great place for that. One other thing was, when you're growing that fast, you need some kind of rules on how you're going to bring people in. And we had some beliefs there. One was that you always try to hire people who are better than you are, which is actually kind of a scary thought. Think about it. You hire somebody better than you are, aren't they going to take your job? Well, it turns out if you hire really great people, you look better and you do better and you learn from them, and it turns out to be a great strategy. Another really strange thing we had was we asked people to accept the offer before we made an offer to somebody, which really sounds kind of counterintuitive. But you don't change, a good person doesn't change jobs all that many times in their career, maybe a little bit more than back then, but still, it's a big thing. And really the thing when you're looking at a new job is it challenging work? Are they good people? Is it a kind of environment I want to be part of? There's a financial aspect to it, but the human brain is incapable of separating that. And once you hear a number, it kind of overrides too many of the other things. So we believe that you should make the right decision. And okay, we're not going to make you sign on the bottom line, but here it is. If you have an offer from us and somebody else, go away, come back and tell me if the financials were exactly the same, you would take our offer, and then I'll make you the offer. Of course you can say no, but it was a great process. And I used this once in sort of the most famous guy I ever hired, Jim Gray. You knew Jim, right, Maria? So Jim Gray was the most famous guy in the database business, even back then. And he was working at IBM, and he had the best job in the business. And I said, I want to hire him. And people said, no way, you can't possibly hire him. He's got the plum job. He's well-known. He's working at IBM Research. But I worked on him for 9 months, and I kept telling him why it was going to be great, and his work would actually get out to see the light of day. And I told him about this thing that we asked people to accept before we make him an offer. And so one day, I guess he finally understood that this was going to be a great opportunity for me. He called me up and he said, okay, I accept. I'll be there on Monday. So I said, great. You want to know what the offer is? He says, no, you can tell me on Monday. Which was an extreme case, but he was a remarkable person. Last point I want to make on Tandem, and a huge lesson, and any of you who go to a high growth company and have the experience of going from a startup and seeing it really be successful, will almost inevitably run into the next generation system. This is a classic. Every successful company is under great pressures when they get started. They can't do everything they want. They skinny it down. They focus. If you're going to be great, you have to run quickly. You have limited resources. You get your product out. The market loves it. And then everybody in the company says, oh, we should do the next generation. Classic book written by Fred Brooks called The Mythical Man Month, back in the 60s, I think, about a big IBM project just like this that failed. And most of these projects fail because they kind of try to reinvent the entire world and do too much. Well, I got to be the leader of our next generation system, the second system. And we took, like Noah's Ark, 2 of the best people from every area. And we had the very best people in the company. And we went off with the blessing of everyone, and we said, here's what we're going to do. And everybody said, that's exactly the right thing to do. We're going to build the greatest thing since sliced bread, get rid of all, it was a 16-bit machine. It's going to be 32 bits. We're going to use this language instead of that. And it failed. I've been involved in lots of things, mostly successes in my career, but you learn the most from your failures. I mean, it's perfectly fine to fail. But after all of us had read The Mythical Man Month, we all knew that this is the thing. So I can guarantee you, if you go to a company and you have success, you will reach this point where there's a desire to redo it all. And my major piece of advice is be careful what you change and balance architectural beauty with practicality. One of the things that engineers love to do is make the perfect system, do it perfect. Well, under the pressure of a startup, you can't do it perfect because you're under too much pressure to get a product out. When you have the luxury of doing it better, do it better, but don't do it perfectly. So let me move to the second major phase of my career, which was Oracle. And after 18 years at Tandem, doing a lot of other things that I won't bore you with, I got a call from Larry Ellison, and he said, I've got a great opportunity for you. I want you to come over here. Long story short is after some discussions, I took a job at Oracle leading what was an amazingly exciting opportunity in interactive TV, which I'll tell you about in a minute. But I got there, and I had a big group of people that were working for me, and the HR person came in and said, do you know that your group has a 20% turnover rate? I don't know if you know about turnover rates, but people leaving the company, at Tandem, we never had more than 10%. 20% is high. That means a fifth of your people are leaving every year. And if you're growing, you have to replace all of those plus all the growth. Plus the people that are growing, they're going to have to replace those people, 20% of them. I said, oh my God, that's terrible. And then I stopped, and it was a huge, huge lesson for me in that I shouldn't say it was wrong or terrible. What I stopped and I said, from now on, I'm going to say it's different. And it's different, but not necessarily, there's some bad things about it, but there's some good things about it. So I stopped and I said, so here's a company that they were about the same size companies. They're about 12,000 people. They were doing about $1.5 billion in revenue, both Tandem and Oracle. Tandem had started a little earlier. But the average age at Tandem was about 37 or 38. The average age at Oracle was about 27 or 28. And I started to realize Oracle had a phenomenal college recruiting program, and there was new blood coming in all the time. Tandem had such a strong culture, nobody ever wanted to leave that place. But, you know, there are negatives to having such a strong culture because people who should have left probably didn't leave. So one of the other big lessons I learned when I saw the contrast between an Oracle and a Tandem was don't react to say it's bad, just say it's different and try to understand the differences, because there's no one right answer. To be a great leader and build a great high growth company, there's no rule book, there's no one answer, there's lots of answers, and you want to look at all these different things and learn from them all. Clearly the difference between Jimmy Trybig and Larry Ellison were like night and day. Jimmy Trybig was the most people-oriented, warm, culture-building person. Tandem was one of the Fortune best places to work a couple of years. It was really a wonderful place. Larry Ellison is one of the most remarkable men I've ever met. Brilliant guy, one of the best business, probably building maybe the most successful company in the IT business. He's not into people. He's not into culture. He's not into creating a warm, fuzzy place. It's a very different attitude. Not good or bad, different. And so I think it's important that you understand the culture of a place that you're going to. It may not be your culture. I didn't last nearly as long at Oracle because it just didn't fit my lifestyle. Plus, in my 4 or 5 years at Oracle, I probably worked 20 years there anyhow. But they're different. So just 2 other points on Oracle. One was, how do you grow a startup inside of a big company? So Oracle was already a big, successful company, very profitable, growing at a tremendous rate. But Ellison, who is one of the better visionaries in the industry, saw this move toward interactive services provided from some network to the home. And in 1993, 1994, there was this massive attention to what was called the information highway and interactive TV. And that's what lured me to go to Oracle, was to run this project. And it was spectacular. This is pre-internet. There was no internet whatsoever. And all of the telephone companies were going to install these massive servers. They were going to connect to set-top boxes in your home. You'll be able to download movies on demand, which you couldn't do. They could shop. You could do all of these things, which now you do on the internet, but you couldn't do it. And we actually had 3 major contracts from 3 big telephone companies, $25 million each, and made a lot of money on it. I had the cream of the crop there, and we actually were very successful in building Microsoft, Digital Equipment Corporation, IBM, all of these companies, SGI, all had projects to try to go after this phenomenal new market. I think Oracle was clearly the most successful in building a real product. We deployed it in trials. It was terrific. There was only one slight problem. It used this new technology called DSL to connect the home to the telephone companies. And DSL, the telephone companies realized, was going to take about $10 billion each to deploy, and it would take several years. Meanwhile, this guy Andreessen at Illinois was doing a little thing called a browser, and all of a sudden the internet started to take off. So interactive TV kind of went into hibernation. It was about 20 years too early. So we had a successful product. We actually made money on it, but the timing was just about 2 decades early. And today you're starting to see, I can show you videos of interactive TV, which is still more advanced than the interactive TV you have in your home today. I'm doing another startup in Palo Alto right now with a group of young guys, a dozen of them, who are doing a true interactive TV platform inside of a TV, which is quite exciting, and this timing may be a lot better. The last point I wanted to make on Oracle was when you lead a high-growth company, there's a lot of different ways that you can position the company and sort of give a message to all the employees about what the big goal is. And many, many companies, the big goal has something to do with serving customers. So GE, we bring good things to life, and HP, there's all sorts of wonderful things about inventing things. Many, many companies are focused on serving the customer. There are a lot of other companies that are focused on beating the competitor. Oracle is one of those. Oracle is an extreme case, and Larry Ellison is a genius in many ways, and he motivates people by focusing on them on beating the competitor. It's not enough that we win, somebody else has to lose. And it's kind of human nature. If you think about it, if you go to a sporting event, the teams are trying to beat each other. They're trying to beat the competitor. They're not really trying to please the audience so much in the stands. There's a lot of places in life where it's great to be on a winning team and you're trying to beat the competitor. So there's nothing wrong with it. It's just a different kind of attitude. And if you look at every ad going back 30 years from when Oracle started, the ads are all pretty much similar. It's 2 columns, Oracle, and whoever the one person that you're competing with is, like maybe it's HP now. And then under Oracle it says yes, yes, yes. And under the other guy it says no, no, no. And as a marketing guy, I used to also run marketing as well as development, you'd be able to fill in the lines, and it would have to all be very truthful. We're better at this, we're better at that, we're better at that. And then at the top, you have a little simple thing that says, we beat the competitor because, look, we're good at all of these things, and they're terrible at all those things. The classic one, I think if you were to go on Yahoo and go to the stock thing and get a quote of the HP stock price right now, Larry has a thing for HP at the moment. And they're all so simple. So in the corner will pop up an ad. So you're looking at the HP stock quote and comes up a little ad, and it actually has 3 companies. It says Oracle, IBM, and HP. And it's all it is those 3 words, and next to Oracle is a jet fighter. Next to IBM is a race car, and next to HP is a tricycle. You don't have to say anything else. That's the story. It's laser focus on beating a competitor. And so as a leader, he's able to direct massive amounts of energy and is typically very successful at knocking off one competitor after another. How are we doing on time, by the way? What's the schedule? I could talk for a long time, but I'll
Well, you could talk for 4 more hours, but it might be better if it was 15 minutes.
15 minutes? Oh, that's plenty of time. So just to finish up on that particular focus on competition, it came down to assignments. So each year I would go into his office and he would say, your job this year is to destroy Sybase. That was another database company. I don't care what else you do, but don't come back here unless they're on their backs by the end of the year. That was a typical marching order. Also, if there was some event, so turns out Sybase went and bought a little tiny company in New England that had some high-performance query capability that we didn't have. And they were 10, 20, 30 times better at doing this one thing. As soon as that acquisition was announced, that day I got a call into Larry's office. He says, okay, you have 6 months. Take whoever you want from your team, 6 months. You must have a feature that will be better or at least competitive to this particular feature. And so it's this focus. Don't let the competitor get one leg up. You must focus on that. And sure enough, we took a dozen great people and we had something. It didn't even have to be better. It just had to be good enough so that we were in the same ballpark. Anyhow, that's the Oracle kind of culture. Anyhow, I spent 4 years there, had a great time. Probably could have spent a lot more time and made more money, but life is short. And I decided to go off and try some other things. It was the bubble back in the late 90s. And I spent a year at Kleiner Perkins. It's probably the most successful venture capital firm. That and Sequoia. I'd say Kleiner Perkins and Sequoia are the two most successful venture capital firms over the last 3 or 4 decades. And I knew the firm quite well. They funded Tandem in the early days. So there, the lessons that I learned were I got to be sort of a partner for a year. I was a CEO in residence, and you get to sit in all the meetings, meet all the companies. And a couple of really important lessons from the venture world were there are millions of ideas. And Kleiner Perkins sees tens of thousands of business plans a year, tens of thousands. And they sort through them, and they meet with hundreds of entrepreneurs, and they might fund a dozen companies. So there's this huge, huge funnel. And when you go there as your first experience, you start looking at all these business plans and, wow, that sounds good. That one sounds good. Let's fund that one. Let's fund that one. Because on the surface, anybody who has an idea can sort of present something that sounds good. But quickly, after you sit through partner meetings and you listen to how they look at these ideas, is this really a high growth opportunity? And you look at, is that really a market? They're talking about, serving jelly beans to Eskimos or something. How many Eskimos are there? And how much are they going to pay for jelly beans? So you start eliminating, well, even if they were successful, the market's too small. We're not interested. Okay, it's an interesting market, but what product are they going to have that's better than the product that serves the market? And so you go through that. They're really not that much better. Throw it away. Okay, but if you find one that's good at that, who are these people anyhow? And you look them in the eye and try to measure the entrepreneurs and say, do they have a track record? Is there any possibility they're going to hire the right people? Is it the right group of people that could bring this to fruition? Okay, if that's the case, then the last one is, given all those things, good market, they got a good product, these are people that probably can deliver, is there a business model that makes money? Are they going to bring profit to the bottom line? And you start going through that many, many times, and you find these are opportunities for growth, and most of them aren't. And I think if for you who are starting out here and looking at your first jobs, they all sound great, but if you're going to go, after you do a little bit of time in a big company and go to a startup, you got to start thinking through past the excitement of the founders and entrepreneurs at, is this really going to be a great company? The world's lived without this company for a long time. Is this really going to make a difference? So that's one thing I got from Kleiner. The other one was, as you start new businesses in new sectors, there's a lot of different ways. You got a new sector opening up, whatever it is, iPad computing or something. I helped start a company there called Choreo, which was the first of what were called application service providers. Now it's called software as a service, where instead of running software in your building, you outsourced it and you had it run out in the network and you connected to it. And it was pretty successful. Vinod Khosla and I started from nothing, and we built it. It went public with over $1 billion valuation. It was eventually acquired by IBM. It became the heart of their services business. And we thought we had done a pretty good job. But at the same time, this guy, Mark Benioff, who had worked with us at Oracle, had the same idea, saw the same new blank space, which is software being run out in what's now called the cloud. And he said, we had taken old software and ran it on Computers that we owned, he said, no, I don't want to do that. I'm not going to do all the software. I'm only going to do one thing, Salesforce automation, and I'm going to do it from the ground up, and I'm going to write it completely differently. And he's created a company that's worth $20 billion. And so we did something that was really good. He did something that was great. And it's a new kind of white space out there. And so as you look at new areas, you have to really push the envelope and think about how can we make a huge difference. Just one or two last things. So over the last 10 years, I spent a year at Kleiner, and then I've been doing what I call advisory leadership. I've been on, I don't know, a couple of dozen boards, small companies, big companies, public companies, nonprofit companies. And I could talk for a couple more hours about them, but let me just pick out one or two that I think might be interesting in terms of growth opportunities. First is I've been on a number of public boards, and when you get to a certain size, you start to look at growth by acquisition. So you can do a lot yourself, but you want to get even bigger, so you start acquiring other companies. And three quick snippets there is I actually led the M&A group at Tandem when I was there. We did a couple of very good acquisitions, but our culture actually was not good as an acquirer. We were too entrepreneur friendly. We were too warm and loving. And what we did is we acquired a company called Unger & Bass, which could have been the next Cisco. It was a great networking company. And we said, oh, we'll let it run by itself over here. We won't change anything, and we'll be nice to the entrepreneurs. And all of that loving and keeping the culture didn't really help the company at all. And it grew, but it wasn't the big success it should have been. When I went to Oracle, we had just done our first acquisitions, and we had acquired a piece of Digital Equipment Corporation, their database group. These guys were petrified of us because we were the big, mean Darth Vader kind of database company, and they had competed with us, and they thought the end was near. I had to run this group, and I went out and met with the team out in the New Hampshire area, and they thought we were going to just shut them down and squeeze all the profits out of it. But we did make significant changes. We had 200 people. We said, okay, 50 of you are going to continue working on your product, and 150 are going to go work on the next Oracle product, which was great. So we used all those people, made our product better. And then we took a lot of Oracle product and wrapped it around their product. And it turned out those 50 people were able to deliver more value to their customers than the 200 did before. So completely restructuring the group, we get more productivity on the Oracle side, more productivity on their side, happy customers, and the most loyal employees in the group. But it wasn't by being nice, it was by ripping the thing apart and putting it back together. And more recently on the Business Objects Board, we did a very big merger where we brought two like-sized companies together, and the acquiring company actually took the heart, the kernel of the acquired company, and replaced, it was like a heart transplant for the acquiring company, which takes a lot of guts to do that. It was a wrenching process for 12 months, but at the end of 12 months, they had clearly jumped into the leadership position in their industry sector. And I've been through, I don't know, a couple of dozen M&A transactions. If you're going to grow through a merger, I'm convinced that you have to be almost brutal when you bring two companies together. You have to really look at the pieces and optimize it. And it's better for everybody. If you're going to have to lay people off, if you're going to close locations, do it at the time you do the acquisition. You'll create a healthier combined entity. And most acquisitions in the high-tech industry fail. There's a high failure rate in acquisitions. And partially it's because people don't attack them and really try to make something happen day one. Last one I'll talk about is a different kind. There's a different kind of company. I don't know if you know about double bottom lines. How about single bottom lines? I asked this in the class. So companies are focused on their bottom line. The bottom line is their profit. You have revenue, subtract expenses, you end up with profit. Most corporations are trying to maximize profit. That's their basic goal, to deliver value to shareholders. There are nonprofits that have a single bottom line, but they're trying to take in whatever revenue, donations, whatever funding, and deliver social value as their bottom line. Double bottom line companies are trying to do both. So I've been involved I'm on my third double bottom line company right now with the same entrepreneur. She started 3 companies, and I've been the chairman of the board of most of them. The second one, for instance, was in the microfinance area where you can make donations, not donations actually, loans. You could make a loan of a small amount and loan money to people in various countries. But her belief was that if you made it a nonprofit, you'd always be your hand out trying to keep the place running. If you could structure it in a way that the company itself made a profit, it could still deliver social value. And so there are a number of these double bottom line companies. Interesting places, they can be high growth, they can be fun places to work. In fact, they can be very rewarding because you can have a job which creates profit for shareholders, it creates good jobs, but at the same time does good in the world. And I was very attracted to it. It turns out they're quite hard to execute on because it's that balance. If you make too much profit, the people that you're serving on the social side say, why are you taking so much profit? You're stealing it from these people that you're trying to do the loans to or do support in the third world or whatever. And on the other hand, if you do too much on the social side, the people who invested in your company say, well, where's my returns? I invested here for a return. So I think it's an interesting area to study. It's clearly, there's possibilities for good growth. There are now a lot of people talking about triple bottom line, where it's not only economic, social, but also environmental impact, and trying to measure the combined impact of a corporation. I'm still sort of struggling with what the right answer is there, but there's some interesting opportunities. It's sort of a nouveau area, and lots of possibilities. A variety of other things to talk about, but I think we're running out of time here. Just bringing things full circle, Maria mentioned that I was chairman of the board of a company called Vertica for the last 4 years, which is a new database company. And it kind of goes back to my beginnings. The same professor I had at Berkeley all those many years ago started a new company a few years ago. I ended up being executive chairman there. And you wonder, how could you possibly do a new database company in this day and age? The game is over. Oracle is sort of won, and Microsoft and IBM are second and third, but everybody else is kind of gone. And it's interesting, it's still possible to create a new business in an existing market by focusing. And so this company said, we're not going to do everything. We're just going to do one thing so phenomenally good, 100 times better than Oracle or IBM, we can create a real business. They did. We just sold it to HP a week or two ago with a very nice outcome. But it was an example of how you can still go into an existing market with dominant players and with clear focus, create something of value. So anyhow, could tell stories here for hours, but lots of other companies and lots of other lessons. Overall, I think being involved in growth companies is a lot of fun. There's a lot of challenges. You learn a lot faster. And I think it's just, in the long run, better than the alternatives. Through that process, you can be leaders. You can be leaders at a technical level. You can be leaders at a managerial level or an advisory level. And interestingly enough, I think it's extremely important for those of you who want to be leaders. But I also think that being a great follower is equally, if not more important. Followership is maybe more important than leadership, because leaders actually don't execute on anything. I mean, the general's out in front of the troops, but it's the troops that actually go out and do the work. So if you're not into being a leader, be a great follower too. And the last thought is that while you're doing all that, you can get caught up in the moment. And I've had so much fun in my career and worked on so many phenomenal things. I've seen a lot of people who kind of fall in love with their jobs. And I've seen that so many times that the last piece I'd advise you is think about your other commitments. If you commitments to your own personal health, if you make a commitment to another person and you get married and you have kids, you can get sucked up in these things. They're so much fun. And I'm fortunate. I've been just celebrated my 40th anniversary to my first wife, and have lovely kids and grandkids by trying to keep that kind of balance. So, you know, the journey is the reward. It's not trying to get someplace. It's enjoying yourself along the way. And I've had a terrific time. I plan to continue this journey for a long time. But keep it in balance and keep it exciting. Thank you. Take some questions if you'd like.